There are moments in life that act as fault lines. Moments where the ground beneath you shifts so violently that the landscape of your world is changed forever. For me, that moment didn't come with a thundering crash or a dramatic explosion. It arrived in the quiet hum of a forgotten phone call, in a string of words spoken with such casual cruelty that they fractured a lifetime of carefully constructed beliefs. This is not just a story about revenge, though revenge is certainly a part of it. It's a story about the slow, agonizing process of waking up to a truth you've spent your whole life trying to ignore. It's about understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to walk away, and it's about discovering that the quietest goodbyes often make the loudest impact. I, Anne, am 36 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my role in my family was simple. I was the provider, the silent supporter, the one who made things happen from the shadows so that someone else could stand in the spotlight. That someone was almost always my younger sister, Lena. Looking back, the signs were always there, scattered like breadcrumbs. I chose not to follow. They were present in the easy way my family accepted my sacrifices, not as gifts, but as due. My life was a quiet one, a world of numbers and risk analysis, where every decision was calculated and every outcome projected. I found comfort in the logic of my work, a stark contrast to the messy, unspoken emotional contracts that governed my family life. I believed, with a naivety that now seems staggering, that my love could be quantified in dollars and cents, that every bill I paid, every debt I cleared, was a deposit into an account of affection that would one day be returned to me. The lead up to Lena's wedding was the culmination of this belief. She was marrying into a family of considerable wealth, and the wedding was to be her grand coronation, the moment she cemented her place in a world she had always felt she deserved. A world I was, of course, expected to finance. I remember the exact moment I made the final, significant payment for the wedding venue. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The rain was streaking down my office window, blurring the city lights into a watercolor painting. The amount was $40,000, a sum that represented years of careful saving and foregone personal luxuries. As I clicked confirm on the wire transfer, a wave of relief washed over me. It was done. I had fulfilled my duty. I leaned back in my chair, imagining the joy on my sister's face, the pride in my parents' eyes. I told myself that this single act would surely be enough. This time, they would see me. Later that evening, I was scrolling through my social media feed when a live interview with Lena popped up. She was at a chic promotional event for some luxury brand, her laughter echoing through the speakers. The interviewer asked her a question that made my blood run cold. Lena, you've built this incredible brand from the ground up. What's the secret to your success as a self-made woman? Lena tossed her perfectly styled hair and smiled dazzlingly into the camera. The secret, she said, her voice dripping with practiced confidence, is independence. It's about never relying on anyone but yourself. You have to be your own biggest investor. I watched, motionless, as the notification from my bank, confirming the $40,000 transfer, remained on my screen. My investment, her independence, the mini hooks, the small tremors before the earthquake, came more frequently after that. There was the incident with her wedding dress. I had given her a generous, clearly defined budget. A week later, I saw a charge on the supplementary credit card I'd given her that was nearly double that amount. When I called my mother, her voice was laced with a familiar, weary impatience. Anne, don't be difficult, she sighed. Lena is marrying into a prominent family. Her appearance is a reflection on all of us. As her older sister, you need to ensure she has the best. Don't be so concerned with money when it comes to your own sister. I remember trying to justify it to myself, reciting the familiar mantra that had become the soundtrack of my life. It's for the family. A little more won't hurt. Keeping the peace is more important. I chose to ignore the fact that peace was a one-way street, paved with my money and my silence. The final crack in the veneer appeared during a family dinner. Just a week before the wedding, I had brought a gift for Lena. A pair of classic pearl earrings I thought would be perfect for her rehearsal dinner. She opened the box, glanced at them for a fraction of a second, and placed them on the table with a dismissive little push. "They're nice, I guess," she said, her tone implying they were anything but. My father cleared his throat, sensing the tension. My mother, however, saw it as an opportunity. She looked at me, her expression not of anger, but of something far worse, pity. "Anne," she began, her voice soft and condescending, "we need to talk about the wedding day. Your sister's guest list is, well, it's full of very important people. Business partners of her new family. Society figures. It's about making the right impression." I nodded, unsure where this was going. "Of course," I said. "I understand." "Good," she continued, her eyes flicking towards Lena for a moment of silent confirmation. "Because we feel it would be best for everyone. If you didn't attend the main ceremony, the presence of all these distinguished guests, it might be awkward for you. We wouldn't want you to feel out of place and embarrass the family and embarrass." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, long after my mother had spoken them. Embarrass the family. The phrase echoed in the sudden silence of the dining room. The rhythmic clinking of cutlery had stopped. My father stared intently at his plate, as if it held the secrets to the universe. Lena, however, didn't even pretend to look away. She watched me, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She was enjoying this. In that moment, I wasn't her sister. I was a problem that had just been elegantly solved. I don't remember how the dinner ended. I think I mumbled something about an early morning at work, a half-hearted excuse that everyone gratefully accepted. I drove home in a daze, the city lights smearing into long, wet streaks across my windshield. Each one a testament to a tear I refused to let fall. For the next 24 hours, I existed in a state of suspended disbelief. I tried to reason with myself, to rationalize my mother's words. She's just stressed. I told myself, she wants everything to be perfect for Lena. I replayed the scene in my mind, searching for a different interpretation, a kinder meaning that I might have missed. It was a fool's errand. There is no kind way to tell someone they are a source of shame. The next evening, I called her. I needed to hear her walk it back. To soften the blow, my voice was calm, carefully measured. I had rehearsed my opening line a dozen times. "Mom," I said, "about what you said the other night, it really hurt me." The sigh on the other end of the line was heavy with impatience. "Oh, Anne, you are always so sensitive," she said, her tone immediately putting me on the defensive.com. "The wedding is a stressful time for everyone. Can't you just be happy for your sister for once? Why must you make everything about you? Is this some kind of jealousy because she's getting the life you always wanted?" Every word was a small, sharp jab, expertly designed to invalidate my feelings and reframe her cruelty as my failing. She wasn't just denying my pain, she was blaming me for having it. I felt the familiar sting of defeat. I had come seeking an apology and had been handed an accusation. We ended the call with the usual platitudes. The hollow exchange of I love yous that felt more like a contractual obligation than a genuine sentiment. That conversation was the second major tremor, and it left me shaken. My analytical mind, the part of me that I relied on for my career, and kicked into gear. It was a defense mechanism, put away to process emotion by treating it like a data problem. If I couldn't trust their words, maybe I could trust the numbers. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled up the shared family folder on my cloud drive, the one where I kept track of the major expenses I was covering. I opened the wedding budget spreadsheet, a document I had meticulously curated, and that's when I saw it. It was a minor reveal, a small discrepancy that most people might have missed. An email thread between Lena and the wedding planner had been accidentally saved into the folder. The planner was politely questioning a significant budget overrun on floral arrangements. Lena's reply was short and breezy. "Don't worry about it," she had written, My sister will cover it. Just add it to the final invoice. She never checks the details anyway. She never checks the details. The phrase was a bucket of ice water to the face. It wasn't just about the money. It was the casual contempt, the assumption of my ignorance, the portrait of me as a blind, open wallet, all my sacrifices, all my meticulous planning and financial support, reduced to a punchline about my own stupidity. My hands were trembling now. The ground was no longer just shifting, it was crumbling beneath my feet. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to hear her lie to my face. It was an irrational impulse, the last gasp of a dying hope. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, her voice sharp with annoyance. "What is it?" "And I'm incredibly busy." I kept my voice even. "Lena, I was just reviewing the wedding budget. I saw an email about the flowers. There seems to be a significant overage." There was a brief pause. "Oh? That," she said, her tone dismissive. "That was just a misunderstanding with the planner. It's all sorted now. I told you I'd handle it." The lie was so smooth, so effortless. It was almost impressive. "Lena, I started. But she cut me off. "Look, I really have to go. My fiancé is here," she said impatiently. I heard a faint click, but it wasn't the sharp, definitive sound of a call ending. It was the dull thud of a phone being tossed into a purse or onto a car seat. Arrogance had made her careless. I was about to hang up, my heart a leaden weight in my chest, when I heard her voice again, muffled but perfectly clear, as if she were speaking in a small, enclosed space. She was talking to her fiancé. God, that was her again. Lena sighed. A theatrical, long-suffering sound. So needy. A man's voice murmured, something I couldn't quite make out. Lena's laugh was brittle. The final payment, yes. Of course. It's sorted. The sad, dutiful cow will take care of it. As always. The man said something else. And this time, her reply came through with chilling clarity. A death sentence to the girl I used to be. "Don't worry, darling," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Once this wedding is over and we're secure, I'm blocking her number for good. No more family charity projects." In that moment, the world didn't just tilt, it stopped. The gentle hum of the refrigerator in my kitchen, the distant sound of traffic outside my window, it all faded into a roaring silence. My fingers went numb, and the phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor. I didn't bend to pick it up. I just stood there, in the quiet of my apartment, finally seeing the full, unvarnished, and horrifying truth. It wasn't a crack in the veneer anymore. The entire facade had just been reduced to dust. For how long I stood there, in the silent darkness of my apartment, I don't know. Time seemed to have dissolved, leaving only the echo of my sister's laughter in its place, a ghost haunting the space where my love for her used to live. The first wave was grief. A physical, gut-wrenching sorrow that brought me to my knees on the cold hardwood floor. I wept. I wept for the sister I thought I had, for the family I had spent a lifetime trying to earn, and for the foolish, hopeful girl I had been just minutes before. Every tear was a farewell to a fantasy I had clung to for 36 years. But then, something shifted. As the hours passed and the first gray light of dawn began to creep through my windows, the tears stopped. The hollowing grief remained, but it was no longer a paralyzing force. It began to cool, to harden, to transform. I pushed myself up from the floor, my movements stiff but deliberate. I walked to the window and looked out at the waking city. In that moment, the sadness didn't disappear. It simply crystallized into a single, unshakable purpose. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my silence for acceptance. They were about to learn, in the most public and undeniable way possible, just how wrong they were. I went to my computer. The screen illuminated my face, which I'm sure was a mask of cold resolve. I opened a new, encrypted spreadsheet, a tool of my trade that I now repurposed for a different kind of risk management. I titled the document Project Freedom. My mind, usually occupied with market fluctuations and investment portfolios, was now singularly focused on a different kind of asset liquidation. I was about to divest myself of a 36-year-long bad investment, my family. My first move was strategic, designed to lull the enemy into a false sense of security. My hands were steady as I picked up my phone and typed a message to Lena. "I'm sorry about yesterday," I wrote. "I've been emotional lately with all the wedding stress." "You're right. This is your time. I'll make sure everything is taken care of perfectly." I hit send. A knot of ice in my stomach. Seconds later, her reply came back. A single word good. It was dripping with the smug satisfaction of a victor who didn't realize the war had just begun. My second move was to seek an ally. There was only one person I could think of. A ghost from my family's past. My uncle, my mother's estranged brother. It took me an hour to find his number through an old family acquaintance. I hadn't spoken to him in over a decade, not since a bitter financial dispute had caused my parents to cut him out of their lives completely. I called him, my heart pounding. He answered on the second ring. I told him everything. I didn't cry this time. I laid out the facts with the detached precision of a risk analyst presenting a report. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought he had hung up. Then, he sighed, a sound heavy with a sorrow that was years old. "Anne," he said, his voice raspy. "I'm not surprised. I'm just so sorry it took you this long to see them for who they are. Your grandmother, she saw it, too. She always did." That's when he told me about the box. Before she passed away, my grandmother had given my uncle a small wooden box and made him promise to give it to me one day. When I was ready, he said my parents knew about it and had insisted it was full of worthless junk. But he had kept it for me all these years. "I think you're ready now," he said. He sent it by courier that same day. The box arrived the next afternoon. It was old. The dark wood worn smooth with age. I pried it open with a kitchen knife. Inside, nestled among a few faded photographs, was a small, leather-bound notebook. It was my grandmother's diary. Her elegant script filled the pages, telling stories of a life I had only known in fragments. I turned to the last few pages, which were dated just a month before she died. And there it was. My secret weapon, my permission, my inheritance. It wasn't money or property. It was a letter, written to me. "My dearest Anne," it began, "if you are reading this, it means you have started to question the role you play. I have watched you grow, my quiet, strong girl, and I have seen how you pour your light into cups that are already full of holes. Your heart is your greatest strength, but do not let them turn it into your cage. Your father and your mother, they love in their own broken way, but they take more than they give. And your sister, she learned from them. I have left you no money in my will, because money is what they value, and they would only find a way to take it from you. Instead, I leave you this truth. You owe them nothing more. Your debt of love has been paid in full, 100 times over. Now, it is time to live for yourself. Please, my dear girl, before it is too late." I closed the notebook, holding it to my chest. The last vestiges of guilt and obligation inside me vanished, replaced by a profound, unshakable clarity. This was no longer just about my pain. It was about honoring her final wish. The storm inside me was no longer raging. It had become a quiet, focused, and unstoppable force, and it was heading directly for Lena's perfect, sun-drenched wedding day. A plan born from pain is a meticulous thing. It is not a wild, chaotic outburst of anger. It is a quiet, deliberate construction, to a series of carefully placed dominoes waiting for the right moment to be tipped. My grief had transformed into a blueprint, and my heartbreak had become my capital. My goal was not simply to ruin Lena's wedding. That would have been too easy. Too crude. My objective was far more precise. I would not destroy her perfect day. I would simply hand her all the tools she needed to destroy it herself. The first phase of my plan began 3 days before the wedding. It was a small, calculated disruption designed to pierce the bubble of her entitlement. I knew that Lena, in her final pre-wedding preparations, would be indulging in a flurry of high-end purchases and spa treatments with her bridesmaids, all charged to the supplementary credit card I provided. That morning, I logged into my bank account and lowered the credit limit on that specific card to $1. The call came, as I knew it would. In the middle of the afternoon, I was in a quarterly review meeting, but I had been expecting it. I excused myself and answered. Stepping into the quiet of the hallway, Lena's voice was a furious shriek. "And what in the world is wrong with your card?" she screeched. The sound of her friends' muffled whispers in the background. "It was just declined at the spa. In front of everyone. You are embarrassing me." I held the phone slightly away from my ear and injected a note of calm confusion into my voice. "Oh, that's strange." "Lina," I said. "I'm looking at the account now, and it seems to be in good standing on my end. There are no security alerts." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Maybe you should try it again. Or perhaps," I added, my voice perfectly neutral, "you could use your own card." The sputtering indignation on the other end of the line was a small, cold spark of satisfaction. "My own card? What are you talking about? You said you would handle these things." "I'm just suggesting a backup option," I replied smoothly. "I'm in the middle of a meeting. Lena, I'll look into it when I can." I hung up before she could reply. I knew this wouldn't raise a major alarm for her. She was too arrogant, too accustomed to a world that bent to her will. She would chalk it up to a temporary bank error, an annoyance, but not a threat. She wouldn't. For a second, I believe it was deliberate. The second domino fell the next day. This one was aimed at the infrastructure of her grand illusion. The wedding planner, a woman with a perpetually frazzled expression, called Lena in a panic. I know this because the planner, in her distress, mistakenly copied me on a follow-up email. "Lena, hi." The email read, "Further to our call, I've spoken with the hotel again. They are insisting that your booking for the grand ballroom has been officially redesignated. They keep mentioning a booking for the Executive Conference Suite B. I told them that was absurd, but they claim to have a confirmation from a family member. Can you please call your sister and sort this out? This is highly irregular." Lena's reply, sent only to the planner, was a masterpiece of dismissive pride. "For heaven's sake, Carol, calm down. It is obviously a clerical error at the hotel. My sister has handled the payment. Call them again and tell them to fix their mistake. That's what I pay you for." My plan hinged on one critical variable, my sister's unshakable belief in my subservience. She couldn't conceive of a world where I would do anything other than what I was told. The warning signs were not just being ignored, they were being actively scorned. She was so busy looking down on me that she never thought to look at what my hands were doing. And that brought me to the final move of the opening gambit. That evening, sitting in the quiet sanctuary of my home office, I made the call that would seal their fate. The phone was on speaker. The manager's polite, professional voice filling the room. "Good evening. Parkview Grand Hotel. This is David speaking." "Hello, David," I said, my voice steady. "This is and when. I'm calling to make a final confirmation on a few details regarding the Wintron wedding booking for this Saturday." "Of course. Ms. Wan, I have your file right here. How can I help?" "I just want to confirm the 2 key changes we discussed yesterday," I said, my eyes tracing the lines of my grandmother's diary on the desk beside me. "First, the primary reservation for the grand ballroom, which was under my name and my account, has been fully and officially canceled. Correct?" There was a soft clicking of a keyboard. "Yes, ma'am." That is correct. The booking is canceled, and all associated services for that space are void. The cancellation fee was covered by your initial deposit. As we discussed. Excellent, I said. And the secondary booking, the one for the executive conference suite B in the basement level, booked under my parents' names, Mr. and Mrs. Moyen. That has been confirmed. And the new, smaller deposit has been paid in full. Yes? Ms. Nguyen, he confirmed. That reservation is secure. The room is booked from noon until 10 p.m. this Saturday. Perfect, I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me. Thank you for your efficiency, David. That's all I needed. I ended the call and sat back in my chair. It was done. The first move on the chessboard had been made. It wasn't a checkmate. Not yet. It was something far more insidious. It was a trap, perfectly constructed and elegantly baited with my family's own pride and prejudice. The door to the grand ballroom was now locked, and the only other door available led straight down to the basement. All they had to do was walk right into it. The final 48 hours before a wedding are supposed to be a whirlwind of joyous anticipation. For my sister, they became a masterclass in the corrosive nature of panic. Panic is a poor strategist. It clouds judgment, prioritizes short-term fixes over long-term consequences, and it often mistakes motion for progress. Lena was in constant motion, a frantic dance of denial and deflection, all while the floor was silently giving way beneath her feet. Her first move, predictably, was to triangulate. Unable to reach me, I had started letting all her calls go straight to voicemail. She turned to the one weapon she knew I was vulnerable to: our parents. She called them, her voice a carefully calibrated performance of a distraught bride-to-be. She wept. She raged. She painted a picture of a jealous, vindictive older sister bent on ruining her happiness. And they, in their lifelong role as her enablers, believed every word. My phone was soon flooded with their messages. First came the pleading voicemails from my mother. Anne, please, call me back. Your sister is a mess. Whatever this is about, you need to stop. Think of the family. When pleading failed, the anger followed. My father left a terse, clipped message that was more of a command than a request. Anne, I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. You will not humiliate this family. Fix this. I listened to each message once, my expression unchanging. I felt a distant, hollow sadness for these people who knew me so little. They weren't trying to understand. They were simply trying to restore the old order, Andersem, the comfortable dysfunction where their golden child was happy and my compliance was guaranteed. I deleted the messages, one by one. The wall of my resolve was holding. Meanwhile, Lena's panic was escalating. The declined credit card was a public embarrassment, but the silent, unanswered phone calls were a direct challenge to her control. For the first time in her life, her primary resource was unresponsive. Faced with this new reality, she made a critical and, frankly, stupid mistake. Desperation made her reckless. On Friday morning, the day before the wedding, I received an automated email from my bank. It wasn't a standard notification. It was a high-level fraud alert. My heart, which I thought had become immune to shock, gave a painful lurch. The email stated that an attempt had been made to initiate an online wire transfer for $25,000 from my primary savings account to an unfamiliar third-party account. The transfer had been flagged and blocked because while the security questions my mother's maiden name, my first pet's name had been answered correctly. The IP address was unrecognized, and the transaction was highly abnormal for my account history. I knew, with a certainty that left no room for doubt, who had done this. In her frantic need for cash, for control, Lena had crossed a line. This was no longer just emotional manipulation or financial dependency. This was attempted theft. This was a crime. I saved a PDF of the bank's official report. It was the final piece of evidence I needed. Not for my plan, but for my conscience, any lingering, microscopic shred of doubt I had about the severity of my response vanished. She had just handed me the justification for what was to come. And still, she clung to her delusion. The morning of the wedding arrived. A beautiful, sun-drenched Saturday. I imagined her in her plush suite at the Parkview Grand, surrounded by bridesmaids, sipping champagne, a serene smile plastered on her face for social media pictures. She had managed to quiet her fears, convincing herself that the glitches were temporary, that I would eventually cave, that the universe would not dare to deny her a perfect day. The unraveling began at precisely 9:30 a.m. The first call was from the florist. His team, with a truck full of thousands of dollars worth of peonies and white roses, was being denied access to the grand ballroom by hotel security. "Lena," he asked, his voice tight with stress. "They're saying there's no event scheduled in the ballroom today. They're telling me my team needs to leave." Lena's response, "I'm sure," was one of annoyance. A problem to be delegated, a peasant to be dismissed. But 10 minutes later, the second call came. It was the catering manager. "Lena, we have 3 trucks of food, a 12-foot wedding cake, and a full staff of 50 people in the loading bay. The hotel events director just informed us that your booking was canceled 2 days ago. We cannot unload. What is going on?" This time, it was not just an annoyance. This was a logistical nightmare. This was real. But the final, fatal blow came from her own wedding planner, Carol. Her voice was no longer frazzled. It was on the verge of a full-blown meltdown. "Lena," she shrieked, all pretense of professional calm gone. "I am standing here with the hotel director. He is adamant. There is no booking for you in the grand ballroom. He says, your family confirmed a change to a conference room in the basement. The groom's family is arriving in less than an hour. I need to tell me what you have done." Right now, in the bridal suite, the world must have come to a screeching halt. The makeup artist would have frozen, her brush hovering mid-air. The bridesmaids would have fallen silent, their champagne flutes clutched in their hands. The carefully constructed fantasy, the entire house of cards built on my money and my silence, had just collapsed. And all that was left in the wreckage was the sound of my sister's scream, a raw, ugly sound of pure, unadulterated rage. The panic had finally, and officially, begun. Lena's scream was the starting pistol for a race she had already lost. The bridal suite, a moment ago, a sanctuary of champagne and serene anticipation, transformed into a war room. Panic, raw and unfiltered, took command. Her bridesmaids, once a giggling chorus of support, now stood in awkward silence, averting their eyes, suddenly very interested in the patterns on the wallpaper. Lena, her face a mask of blotchy rage beneath a half-finished layer of foundation, was barking orders into her phone, her voice cracking with hysteria. The first of her allies to fall was the most important one, her fiancé, Alex. He strode into the suite, not with the comforting embrace of a concerned partner, but with the sharp, impatient energy of a CEO addressing a failing department head. His perfectly tailored suit seemed to radiate disapproval. "Lena, what is this?" he demanded, his voice low and tight. He didn't need to raise it. The authority was absolute. "My father just called me. He said your wedding planner is having a nervous breakdown in the lobby, and guests are arriving with nowhere to go." "Explain this." Lena's strategy was to deflect, to create a villain. "It's nothing." "Darling," she insisted, her voice unnaturally high. "It's just a ridiculous mistake. Some mix-up at the hotel. It's my sister, and she is doing this. I know it. She's jealous. She's always been jealous." Alex stared at her, his expression unreadable. "Your sister," he repeated. The words clipped. "The quiet, generous sister who, according to you, handled and paid for everything. The one you assured me was completely reliable." He took a step closer. "You have 1 hour to fix this." "Lena, My family did not fly halfway across the country to be publicly humiliated. The threat was no longer implicit. It was a deadline. He turned and walked out, leaving a chilling silence in his wake. The second pillar of her support system, our parents, arrived at the hotel a few minutes later. They were not there to investigate, they were there to fight on Lena's behalf. They stormed into the grand lobby, my father's face flushed with self-righteous anger. My mother already preparing a speech about the incompetence of the hotel staff. They made a direct line for the front desk and demanded to see the manager, David. The manager I had spoken with emerged from his office. He was the picture of professional calm, an unshakable wall against which my father's blustering anger immediately broke. "Sir," David said, his voice polite but firm. After my father had finished his tirade, "As I have already explained to the wedding planner and several of your vendors, the booking for the grand ballroom was officially canceled 2 days ago. The cancellation was confirmed by the sole account holder for that reservation, Ms. and when." My father was momentarily speechless. That's impossible," he stammered. "I can assure you, Sire, our records are quite clear," David continued smoothly. "Ms. Nguyen was very specific." It was in that moment, watching my parents' outrage deflate into stunned confusion, that the true nature of their complicity became clear. They had never once considered the source of the funds that built their pedestal. They had only ever cared about the view from the top. The lobby was now filling with elegantly dressed guests, their polite smiles faltering as they took in the scene. The air was thick with whispers, and the excruciating tension of a social catastrophe unfolding in real time. Alex and his parents stood near the entrance. A tight, furious unit, their faces carved from stone. And then, David, playing his part perfectly, stepped into the center of the lobby. He cleared his throat, and his voice, amplified by the cavernous space, drew every eye. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention," he said, as if making a routine announcement. "There appears to have been a scheduling adjustment for the Nguyen Tran wedding." He paused, letting the anticipation build. My parents and Lena looked at him. A desperate. Foolish hope dawning in their eyes. "While the grand ballroom is unfortunately unavailable," David continued, a model of helpfulness, "I am pleased to say that we do have another event space reserved under the name of Mr. Ressus and Mrs. Nguyen. If the entire party would please follow me, we would be happy to escort you there now." It was a masterstroke. He had offered them a lifeboat, and they clung to it, oblivious to the fact that it was heading straight for the waterfall. A wave of relieved chatter went through the crowd as they began to follow David. I can only imagine the walk of shame out of the magnificent, sunlit lobby, past the marble fountains, down a sterile white corridor typically used by staff, and finally, to a set of service elevators. The descent into the basement was surely a quiet one. The doors opened to a low-ceilinged, windowless corridor. At the end of it was a set of double doors with a small sign that read, "Executive Conference Suite B." David pushed them open, revealing the scene of Lena's new reality. The room was an abyss of beige and gray. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. The lighting was a harsh, fluorescent glare. In the corner, a sad stack of interlocking chairs and a single, scuffed lectern stood as the only furnishings. A collective gasp went through the crowd. I was told later that Alex's mother let out a small, horrified sound, as if she had just seen something crawl out of the carpet. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum of pure, unadulterated humiliation. Alex, who had been silent throughout the procession, finally moved. He walked slowly to the center of the dreadful room. He looked at the stained carpet, the water-spotted ceiling tiles, and then he looked at Lena, who stood frozen by the doorway, her white dress looking garishly out of place, like a swan in a sewer. "This is it?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Yet it carried to every corner of the room. "This is your family's grand wedding. This is your prominence." He gave a short, bitter laugh that was devoid of all humor. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned to his stunned parents. "We are leaving." Then, he faced Lena one last time, and his eyes, once filled with what she had mistaken for love, now held nothing but ice-cold contempt. "The wedding is off," he stated. Each word, a final, brutal nail in the coffin of her dreams. "My lawyers will be in contact with you regarding the matter of fraudulent misrepresentation. There is a unique silence that follows a complete and total social implosion. It's a vacuum, heavy with the ghosts of what might have been the laughter, the music, the polite applause. I imagine that silence was deafening in the gray, fluorescent lit misery of the executive conference suite B. The humiliated guests had fled. The furious ex-in-laws were gone. All that remained were my parents and my sister, standing amidst the wreckage of a future that had evaporated before their very eyes. The wedding was over. The marriage was over. The grand illusion was over. But the reckoning was not. My phone rang. It was Lena. I let it ring 3 times before answering, putting it on speaker, and activating the recording app on my laptop. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the one I needed not for my plan, but for the permanent record. Her voice was not the polished, condescending tone of an influencer. It was the raw, ragged shriek of a cornered animal. "How could you?" she screamed, the sound distorted by her rage. "You ruined my life, my entire life. Everything was perfect. And you destroyed it. Why? After everything I did to get here, why would you do this to me?" For the first time in our entire conversation, I let the ice in my own voice show. "Why?" I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. "You dare to ask me why? Let me ask you. Lena, why did you feel entitled to my money, my time, and my life? Why did you think it was acceptable to lie to me, to steal from me, and then to mock me behind my back?" I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. The default defense of a lifelong liar. "Don't you?" I pressed, relentless now. "Then let me remind you. Why did you tell your fiancé I was a sad, dutiful cow that you were going to cut off after the wedding? Tell me. Lena, I'd really like to know." There was a choked sound on the other end of the line. She was caught. The rage, having found no purchase on my calm, turned to a desperate, self-pitying justification. "So what if I did?" she finally spat. The words, dripping with venomous resentment. "So what you owed us. You had it so easy, with your quiet life and your stable job. While I had to fight and claw for everything, you owed me a chance at a good life. After everything this family has done for you, you owed me that wedding." And there it was. The confession, the raw, unfiltered truth of her entitlement. Her belief that my life's work was nothing more than a fund for her ambitions. I let her words hang in the air for a long moment. "Thank you, Lena," I said, my voice eerily calm. That's all I needed to hear. I hung up before she could say another word. I looked at the digital file on my laptop screen, Lena's truth. MP3. It was time to end the game. I opened the family group chat. It was a chaotic mess of frantic messages from my parents and confused texts from extended family members who had heard rumors. I took a deep, steadying breath. My fingers moved quickly. Purposefully. Across the screen, I was not an angry sister anymore. I was an analyst, presenting my final report. The first message I sent was the audio file. It uploaded in seconds. Its title was simple, Lena's Admission of Intent. Audace. The second message was a high-resolution photograph. It was the crisp, clear image of the page from our grandmother's diary. Here elegant. Damning script, perfectly legible for all to see. I captioned it, Grandma's Final Wish, Aminietta. The third and final message was a picture. It was the selfie my uncle and I had taken just a couple of hours earlier. We were seated at a window table at the 5-star restaurant across the street from the hotel. Below us, the chaotic scene in the lobby had been a distant, silent movie. In the photo, we were raising our glasses, not with triumphant glee, but with a quiet, serene sense of peace. On my face was the first genuine smile I'd had in years. I added one last line of text beneath the 3 files, sent to the entire group for all the world to see. To everyone wondering why today unfolded as it did, the answer is, in these files, I am celebrating my freedom and honoring my grandmother's last wish. To my family, I wish you the life you have now earned for yourselves. I hit send. Then, I opened a private message to Lena's number. I typed one final sentence. The true checkmate of our long and painful game. This was never about the money. Lena, you lost the moment you mistook my silence for weakness. I blocked her number, then my mother's, then my father's, one by one. I snipped the toxic threads that had bound me for so long. The storm was over. The board was cleared, and for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely, and gloriously free. Revenge, I discovered, is not a destination. It's a gate. You walk through it, and you make a conscious choice to leave the scorched earth of the past behind you. The days that followed my digital checkmate were not filled with triumphant celebration. They were quiet, still, and strangely empty. The constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to my life for decades had finally stopped. In its place was a silence so profound, it was almost disorienting. I had to learn to live in it. I had to learn to be free. The next 6 months were a period of quiet reconstruction. My life, no longer drained by the constant emotional and financial needs of my family, began to flourish in ways I had never imagined. At work, unburdened by the constant stress, my focus sharpened. I took on a major project, a high-stakes portfolio that everyone else was too timid to touch. And I navigated it to a success that earned me a significant promotion to vice president. But the most important change was not professional. I took the inheritance my grandmother had left me, her wisdom, her truth, and gave it physical form. I established a small educational scholarship fund in her name, dedicated to helping young women from disadvantaged backgrounds pursue careers in finance. It was a way to turn the pain I had endured into a positive force in the world, to ensure her legacy was one of empowerment, not sorrow. My relationship with my uncle and his family blossomed. We spent holidays together, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Their home was filled with easy laughter and quiet support, a world away from the transactional, conditional love I had grown up with. We were a new family, one forged not from blood, but from mutual respect. I heard about my old family, of course, through the quiet whispers of the extended family grapevine. The consequences of their actions had been swift and brutal. Lena's online persona, built on a fantasy of wealth and self-made success, was shattered overnight. The audio file and the story of the disastrous wedding spread like wildfire through her social circles. Her sponsors dropped her. Her followers turned on her. Her career as an influencer was over. Without my financial support, the lavish lifestyle my parents had become accustomed to was unsustainable. The beautiful family home, the one I had spent over a decade paying for, was built on a foundation of my sacrifice. When that foundation was removed, the house could not stand. They were forced to sell it and move into a small, rented apartment on the other side of the city. I felt no joy in hearing this news. I felt nothing at all. Indifference, I learned, is the true opposite of love, and I had finally achieved it. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, a letter arrived. It was a simple white envelope, addressed to me in my father's shaky, unfamiliar handwriting. I left it on my kitchen counter for a full day, unsure if I wanted to open that door, even a crack. In the end, my curiosity won. The letter was not a demand or a justification. It was not even a perfect apology. It was something more raw, more real. It was a confession. And it began. There are no excuses for how we treated you. I see that now. I was a weak man. A father who chose the easy path of indulging one child at the expense of another. I let my pride and your mother's ambitions blind me to your worth, to your incredible generosity. I read your grandmother's words. She was right. We failed you. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that, for what it's worth, I finally see the truth. I read the letter twice. A single tear, hot and unexpected, traced a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or even of returning love. It was a tear of release. It was the final, quiet click of a lock I didn't even know I was still carrying. I folded the letter and put it away in a drawer. I would not be replying. Some things, once broken, cannot be perfectly mended, but they can be understood. I stood at my window. On the same window from which I had once looked out at a future that felt bleak and predetermined. Now, I saw something different. I saw a city of infinite possibilities. I saw a life that was entirely, completely, and unapologetically my own. The game was over. The board was cleared, and the quiet, dutiful cow had finally found her own pasture. So, what can we take away from Anne's story? The primary lesson, I believe, is about the nature of trust and the strength found in silence. Familial trust, once deliberately shattered, can never be glued back together in quite the same way. The story teaches us that sometimes the most powerful action isn't a loud confrontation, but a quiet, strategic withdrawal. It's about letting the consequences of others' actions speak for themselves. We feel a deep empathy for the profound pain and endured the agony of being betrayed by those who should have protected her. Her journey affirms a crucial truth: setting firm boundaries to protect your mental, emotional, and financial well-being is not selfish. It is a necessary and profound act of self-respect. It is choosing to be the hero of your own story, even if it means stepping away from the role you were assigned in someone else's. And that brings us to a question for you. What would you have done in Anne's position? Is there a point where you believe a line was crossed? Or was her response, the only logical conclusion, is silence always golden? Or are there moments when we must raise our voices, no matter the cost? Share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. Story 2. This is only a rant post, but any guidance would be much appreciated. My sister's husband went crazy when I told him that I was seeing someone else. I'm Ashley, 17 farads. My sister, who we'll call Jess, 25 farads, has been married for 2 years, to her husband Jake, 34 meters. They got together when she was just starting college and have been together since. As far as I know, they've never had any problems, and anytime they came around to visit, they literally seemed like the model relationship. My parents never really made any of the right choices in life, and because of this, my sister basically raised me herself. I'm grateful to her for this, and I know that she had to make so many sacrifices to be able to do so. When she was in college, I'd make sure to call her at least like 3 times a week just to get updates and see how she was doing in these conversations. She'd talk about schoolwork, what she was planning to do, and then she'd talk about Jake. She described him so wonderfully that it literally upped my own standards of love. For example, all the flowers she got, all the beautiful dates she went on, and how he treated her. So, amazingly, after living with my parents, who should have gotten divorced a long time ago, I wasn't someone who had a guide of what a healthy relationship should look like, so I became quite close with Jess and Jake. It had always been me and my sister growing up. When she introduced me to Jake, it felt like I finally had an older brother. Eventually, Jess and Jake moved in together, got engaged, and are now married. My parents kicked me out because I wouldn't pay them rent. I work at a luxury horse ranch, and they give you free lessons from a riding instructor and let you use their horses for practice. Overall, I love my job too much to leave because of these benefits, even though my pay isn't that great. And given how much my parents were asking, I would have to quit or find another job to make ends meet. I don't know what Jake does for a living, but Jess told me it was his family business. So that explains it. Jake works from home. So, unless he's taking Jess out or going to the gym, he's at home. He earns enough money doing whatever he does. They recently informed me that they were expecting, and I was obviously thrilled for them. However, because my sister has experienced a number of miscarriages in the past, we needed to exercise extra caution with her. And this pregnancy has proven to be extremely complicated, even in its early stages, making it extremely risky. Hopefully this is enough for you to get a clear idea of what's going on. My parents had an old car that I was allowed to drive to work and school, but after they kicked me out, I could no longer use it. This was a bummer, as I always liked of the sense of freedom that having a car gave me. But whatever, I'll get over it. Jake insisted that he would start taking me to school in the morning and then driving me to in from work. I was extremely grateful for this because I didn't have to take the bus or walk. So after Jake finished his daily routine at the gym, he would head home, shower, get me Starbucks, and drop me off at school. And then in the afternoon, he would pick me up from school and then drive me to work. At the end of my shift, he was usually waiting outside or on the way. So it was really a great help, and I was so thankful that he would take so much time out of his day to help me in the car. We'd end up talking and having conversations, whether it was about Jess or the plans for the baby, but he'd always ask me if I was dating someone or had a crush on them. He'd wink and be like, "You're so beautiful, it's not possible. There's got to be something you're hiding from me. Come on, you can tell me you know. And I can keep a secret, just tell me. I mean, there was a guy." I'll give him that, but it was too early to talk about, which meant I ended up being vague because I didn't want to lie to him, basically just playing coy and not answering any of his questions with too specific of an answer, because I just didn't feel like jinxing myself eventually. I was really excited when Alex, a 19-year-old man I was talking to, asked me out on a date. His family owned the ranch where I worked, so we ended up hanging out a lot. Normally, during my shifts, he would come and help me out, or we would go riding together. When I told Jake I was going home after work, he instantly seemed to lose interest. I don't know how else to explain it, but there was no longer a familial warmth. He started asking a lot of questions, very matter-of-factly, and I answered because I figured it was just the protective older sibling thing, and that it might take some time for him to get used to it. But then when I told him that we'd been talking for a month or so, he freaked out and got really angry. I ended up crying when he started calling me a liar and saying that I've been trying to hide this from him. The one thing that stayed on my mind since is that he literally said, "What about us?" which has left me so confused because what does he even mean? The worst part is that now, because of how he acted, I'm overthinking a lot of what has happened. Since I came to live with them, there's a pool in the backyard of Jake's house, and sometimes I'll go out there to swim or just to lie out there and tan. However, I've now come to realize that any time I went out for a swim or tried to sunbathe, that Jake would make an Napoleon excuse to come and do something outside, whether he'd start up the grill or mow the lawn. I'd get that feeling that I was being watched, but a few times he just started swimming with me, but I figured he was just trying to work out, like me. After I exit the pool, I go to take a shower in the hallway, where Jake and Jess have their own connected to the master. After I finish, I go to my room, change, and go to sleep. Sometimes, though, Jake would wait for me in the short hallway to my room, where I'm only wearing a towel. And then he would say, "Good night," to which I would respond. But now I'm wondering if there was another reason. My sister has been extremely fragile lately, and this pregnancy is really getting to her. So, I don't want to bring up these worries with her because I don't want to endanger her or the unborn child. I just need an answer as to whether or not I'm overanalyzing more information. I honestly didn't think about the possibility that my sister would choose his side over mine. But after reading all of the comments, I feel compelled to gather that proof and do all in my power to change the relationship between us without raising any red flags. I'd be more than happy to tell my sister if I think there's any immediate danger. But as I've already stated, I don't think he's the kind of person I'd rather wait until she's healthier to try and relay this news just to be safe, because my sister could seriously get hurt from not only the emotional damage, but the risk in her pregnancy. I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it was really frightening to see how he flew off the handle like that. I really feel like he's probably just been under too much stress because my sister's pregnancy is really high risk, and he's had to take care of her much more than usual. He's probably just worried that something will happen to her. But even if I do give him the benefit of the doubt, I should set some boundaries because when he had that blow up, it really unnerved me, and I didn't feel safe. I'm going to ask some of my friends if they'd be willing to carpool me since I know I'll never be able to overow him. If the worst happens, I'll also ask Alex if he can give me a lift from work. Since I don't feel the need to be hostile and foster an aggressive environment, I'll just look for a job that I can walk to in the interim. In the meantime, I'll make an effort to highlight the brotherly bond I have with him. Aside from that, I'll be taking some actions to see if I can improve my circumstances. Update. Is my sister's husband acting strangely? Or am I overanalyzing this? I want to start by thanking everyone who commented on my previous post last night and offered advice of any kind. After reading all of the comments, I realized that I'm no longer safe in the situation, and I will be making changes going forward because, as much as I love and respect Jake, I don't think the risk is worth it. He was still in a foul mood. So I went to my room in the middle of the night because I felt like I really needed to leave the house. But I really just started feeling so trapped. So I decided to take a walk to my smoke spot and then try to clear my head. I'm not even there. I did try to start a conversation with him after I posted, and got some advice just to see if there's a chance we might be able to talk about this. I don't believe I can adequately express the terror I'm feeling as my phone begins ringing non-stop 15 minutes before I get a text asking where you're from. Jake. When I finally picked up the phone, I was met with a barrage of insults, including that I'm an effing princess who always gets her way and that I should be treated like that I am. He then asked me to send him my location, which was completely inappropriate. So I told him to stop and consider what he had just said. I did end up calling Alex afterwards, who thankfully picked up and explained everything to him. I'm really not sure how much he understood, considering I was literally shaking and crying so violently, but he ended up driving over to my spot and asking a few more questions about the entire situation. While he tried to calm me down, I was able to relax eventually and told him everything again with a clearer head. Throughout all of this, my phone had been ringing off the hook, but assuming that it was Jake, I just let them keep going eventually. I can see that it's my sister's phone calling me, and despite knowing that there was a good chance that it was Jake on the other end, I still picked up. It was indeed Jake who unleashed another flurry of insults at me loud enough for Alex to hear and take the phone from my hand. He told Jake to shut the up and that I'm safe, then hung up afterwards. He just told me that it was going to be okay, and not to worry about it. He ended up driving me all the way to the ranch and told his parents about what happened. And my current situation, I'm really appreciative that they chose to take me in and allowed me stay in one of their spare rooms so I could do a little more work around the farm. After that, I simply attempted to fall asleep by cuddling with Alex. In the end, I decided not to go to school today because I was just trying to take a break. But after Jake's response and the remarks got to me, I started to worry about my sister. I was glad to call her, and she was clearly crying when she asked if I was okay and safe. Jess told me that the night before she had woken up to Jake's yelling, and it really startled her, so she pretended to still be asleep. She ended up hearing him come back into their room and take her phone off of her charger afterwards. She heard the yelling again, and then the front door slamming. Apparently, Jake had gone to look for me and had kept my sister's phone with him. She told me she had no idea what to do, but she was just scared that he was going to genuinely hurt me after an hour or so. Jake had come back home, but he was clearly still in a bad mood, because when she asked where he was and what happened, he ended up blowing up on her too for questioning him. She said she'd never seen him this angry before, and he was literally wrecking furniture. After a few minutes of this, he had gotten back into the car and left, but thankfully left her phone on the counter. She looked at the call logs and saw all the calls to me while Jake was gone. She ended up calling a friend to pick her up, and then tried reaching out to me, which at that point I was sleeping. But she told me she was scared that he had found me. She told me she was really sorry for not being able to protect me herself and failing to see that this was happening. Jess asked me why I didn't tell her about any of his behavior, but I told her that I didn't want to stress her out with the pregnancy. And then we both had a long cry. Apparently my parents are allowing her to move back and rent-free because they want to help raise their grandbaby if this had been an option in the first place. None of this would have happened, but I digress. My sister and I ended up going out for dinner where I showed her my post. We cried again. She told me that she'd want Passan. Never been scared of him before, but after seeing his anger the night before, she was shaken. Both of us still need to get our stuff, but we're going to reach out eventually and set a date that we can move all our jusses out. My dad and Alex will both be there just in case. He tries to pull anything according to my sister. He has tried to reach out and Ola Liz so many times, but he just claims that he was worried for my safety and that I shouldn't be out at night. He had no idea that she could hear exactly what he was yelling at me, so she knew for a fact he was lying. After informing him that she would be filing for divorce, Jess hung up. I sincerely thank the Reddit commenters for making me feel so stressed that I needed to take a smoke break. I don't know what would have happened if I had been in my room that night, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. I love my sister, and I wish her the best in life. I know she will get over this and find an amazing man who loves her, and only her. In other news, Alex and I are going on a date next week, so I'm pretty happy about that.